Waters World is on tonight.
President Putin and I have been discussing various things, and I think it's going very well. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you. Thank you.
The heavyweight showdown, the likes of which the world hasn't seen since Rocky versus Drago. President Trump and Vladimir Putin go one-on-one. White House advisor Kellyanne Conway and Fox News host Eric Bolling here with reaction. Plus, the left out of touch with America, still completely dumbfounded by President Trump's victory. One professor even calling for a college course to understand white people. That professor joins me. And what did you think of the Trump CNN wrestling video?
President Trump tackled CNN the way he's going to tackle fake news and the way he's going to make America great again.
Waters World heads to WWE SummerSlam to see what fans think of CNN's blackmail boondoggle. It all begins right now. Welcome to Waters World. I'm Jesse Waters. How the West was won and news lost, that is the subject of tonight's Waters Words. President Trump delivered a Reagan-esque defense of Western civilization in Poland this week.
The fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Just as Poland could not be broken, I declare today for the world to hear that the West will never, ever be broken. Our values will prevail, our people will thrive, and our civilization will triumph.
President Trump also spelled out a very substantive geopolitical and economic policy in order to pull Poland and other Eastern European nations away from their dependence on Moscow.
We are committed to securing your access to alternate sources of energy, so Poland and its neighbors are never again held hostage to a single supplier of energy.
But instead of focusing on the defense of Western civilization and policy, the American media ignored it and took partisan cheap shots.
It's tough to be leader of the free world and king of the trolls at the same time.
The first half of the speech was packed with platitudes and trite, obvious talking points.
It was a tedious speech. It needed serious editing.
President Trump also held a press conference with the Polish Prime Minister, where he was asked about the CNN wrestling video, again labeling CNN fake news, and again responding to questions about Russian interference in our election. CNN White House correspondent Jim Acosta couldn't handle it and embarrassed himself.
For the president to then go off on CNN as fake news, to me, just made this entire spectacle seem like a fake news conference. The other thing that was fake news coming from President Trump is when he said, well, I keep hearing it's 17 intelligence agencies that say Russia meddled in the election. I think it's only 3 or 4. Where does that number come from? Where is this 3 or 4 number come from? My suspicion, Chris and Poppy, is that if we go to the administration and ask them for this question, I'm not so sure we're going to get an answer. And if we do get an answer, it'll probably be off camera.
First of all, Jim, if Donald Trump called on a friendly reporter and that makes it a fake press conference, then President Obama had fake press conferences for 8 years. And second of all, the president got the number 3 or 4 from the New York Times. They corrected the fake news story that 17 intelligence agencies said Russia interfered in the election. So it's you, CNN, that's pushing fake news. Not to be outdone, CNN's Chris Cillizza tried to trivialize the president's trip by tweeting out this deceiving video, trying to make it look like the Polish First Lady snubbed President Trump, but President Duda correcting the record tweeting, contrary to some surprising reports, my wife did shake hands with Mrs. and Mr. Trump after a great visit. Let's fight fake news. And the full video clearly shows the president did shake the Polish First Lady's hand, and there was no gaffe. I don't recall Chris Cillizza mocking President Obama for bowing to the Saudi king. The mainstream media even caught pre-spinning the Trump-Putin meeting with this headline. For Russia, Trump-Putin meeting is a sure winner. Turns out, it looks like a win for Trump and America, starting with a ceasefire in Syria.
This is our first indication of the U.S. and Russia being able to work together in Syria, and as a result of that, we had a very lengthy discussion regarding other areas in Syria that we can continue to work together on.
That included areas like North Korea, Ukraine, and ISIS. And President Trump didn't let Putin go without pushing him on election hacking, which Putin denied. So the bottom line is the media is not covering the president fairly, is not covering the president fully, and continues to trivialize him and push fake news, which is why if you want to see the president covered fairly, tune in to Waters World. President Trump and Vladimir Putin meeting face-to-face in Hamburg, Germany for the first time this week. They had their highly anticipated sit-down meeting, which was the first formal conversation Vladimir Putin and a U.S. president have had in 2 years. Joining me now with reaction is counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. So, Kellyanne, it's great to have you in Waters World. What did you think of Waters' words?
Thank you, Jesse. I love them because you actually laid out some facts, and that's very refreshing in this climate. I thought it was incredibly unfortunate that the White House correspondent from a major news organization would go all the way to Poland and, following the president's speech, which was applauded by so many people, right, left, and center, including many of President Trump's usual detractors, that they applauded him for really appealing to our spirit, our pride, our identity, talking about how borders may fall and nations may suffer, but the will of the people is always strong and so important, really going back to our Western values. And yet, just making it about them again. I mean, the media are caught in this terrible cycle of trying to make most of the stories about them. They tweet at each other. They tweet snarkily about the president, things that would never pass an editor's desk, would never pass producer muster on a television program, we think. And they make such a big deal about the president's social media platform. Have you seen theirs lately?
I want to ask you a question about this meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. This is what Brinkley said about the meeting on CNN. Roll the tape.
He's already kissing the ring of Putin. Putin's going to go back already, a champion.
So the narrative is that President Trump kissed Putin's ring and that President Trump said it was an honor to be with Vladimir Putin, which was not a good idea to say. And the media is obsessing over how long the meeting took. They can't seem to understand what's going on. What is going on, Kellyanne?
They're not, but everything you've just said is completely irrelevant to the actual meeting and to what President Putin and President Trump may be able to accomplish together. The president has said in the past, if there was a willing partner out there to help defeat ISIS, he's listening. They can talk about nuclear-capable North Korea with a very different ICBM now.
Yep.
They can talk about energy. They can talk. There are so many things that they can talk about, and they did because they're the two presidents of their country. I mean, all the media speculation and the hand-wringing, really just the gratuitous insults and innuendos, they don't matter. They don't matter to that meeting, and they don't matter to the American people. Have you seen the approval rating of the media lately?
I know. I mean, it's in the tank right now. And you were just saying, they cover these small ball issues. You had 220,000 jobs created last month.
In June, that's right.
You have a lot coming out of this Putin-Trump meeting, and they're focused on handshakes and what tie the other person wore. I want to show you some funny video also. There was a moment at the G20. Take a look at this. The supposed anti-Trump candidate who just won the French elections, President Emmanuel Macron, making his way across the class picture, so he could stand there with President Trump. Now, the left loves to say that the president has no allies over there in the continent, yet the leader of France is jockeying for position to be pictured with the American president.
I've seen this many times, Jesse. Last Labor Day, we invited the pool onto the plane for the first time, I guess, in a while, for a 20-minute quick trip between Cleveland and Youngstown in Ohio. And there was somebody there, a print reporter, who was literally just hitting Mr. Trump day after day after day. And once he was in his company, it was like, can I help you hold your things? Because they were, he was shaking and they were falling. And it's when you're in the company of President Trump, you realize that it's a special place to be, and that you're with the most powerful man in this country, if not the world, the free world.
Reality has a way of intruding on the press narrative.
It does. But I just want to say one quick thing.
Quickly, because I want to get to North Korea.
Sure. President Macron has invited President Trump to France next week, and the president is going. He's turning right around and going back to Europe at the invitation of President Macron. So I think this is very significant. And again, at the leader-to-leader level, there are issues discussed and ideas presented and matters conquered together that are way above what everybody else is discussing.
Exactly. North Korea, I want to get your reaction there. They tested the ICBM the other day. It looks like China, in my opinion, doesn't want to see a unified Korean peninsula. They want to keep a divided Korean peninsula because they're not doing anything to show that they're going to make progress on denuclearization. In your opinion, how optimistic is the White House about making China understand the threat and having China use its vast influence, because the trade is about 40% right now through China and North Korea, of calming things down on the peninsula?
A few things. In the first couple of months of his administration, President Trump has met with all of these leaders. Obviously, he's established a positive relationship with respect to trade, for example, with President Xi of China. We have beef going over to China for the first time in a very long time, for example. At the same time, he's met with the leaders of South Korea, Mr. Moon and Mr. Abe of Japan. They had a trilateral dinner just last night, just this week, overseas. And so everybody's very serious about focusing on the fact that North Korea launched a missile that seems to have different capabilities. As Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis mentioned, though, we are currently exploring the economic and diplomatic channels in response. But at the same time, the president has expressed his opinion on China with respect to North Korea, and everybody should take a look at that.
I appreciate the things that you have done relative to the very substantial problem that we all face in North Korea, a problem that something has to be done about. And I'm sure that whether it's on trade or whether it's on North Korea or any of the many things that we'll be discussing, we will come to a successful conclusion.
And no, that's not fake news, quote unquote. That's the president speaking about very serious issues. Let's see how much the media cover these issues, though. It's a serious point, because you've seen these reports where they cover Russia 50 times more than they cover the economy or healthcare or infrastructure. So let's see how seriously they take the threat of North Korea and inform the public.
It's a threat that should unite all Americans, Republicans and Democrats, and even the media. Kellyanne, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse.
An NYPD officer gunned down by a cop hater, echoing Black Lives Matter mantras like this.
Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon. Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon.
Is it time the Black Lives Matter is listed as a terrorist organization? A fiery debate coming up. But first, remember this?
He's a loose cannon. He's going to get us in trouble.
I feel like I'm kind of in mourning for America.
He should not be president. He's unfit to be president.
Voters in disbelief following Donald Trump's election win. Now one college professor wants to study these strange white Americans who voted Trump. He joins me next.